Scramble. I'm your host, Luis Rodriguez. Thank you for being with us. On today's show, we will discuss the attacks in Brussels, the presidential race, and finally UNLV's new basketball coach. Before we begin, let me introduce our panel. First, we have David Sarabian, a UNLV graduate in political science. Next, we have James Schaefer, a junior majoring in journalism and media studies. And finally, we have Matt Kimball, a UNLV graduate in political science. Thank you for being with us.
Of course. Thanks for having us.
All right, let's begin with our first topic, but a tragic one. On March 22nd, 2016, 3 ISIS bombers went into a Brussels airport in Belgium and killed 32 and wounded 300. An explosion during the search of the explosion, officials found one of the surviving conspirators in the terrorist attack. This conspirator was actually tied to the Paris bombings. So what are your guys' thoughts on this attack? Let's start with you, David.
Well, people seeing the events of this, which are of course tragic, some commentators, especially on CNN, they said, oh, you know, airports are still a soft target. And it just struck me, just the lack of expertise. People seem to be going on saying they're counterterrorism experts. Abu Nidal's terrorist organization was made famous for the Egyptian airliner attacks, which they went to the luggage counter and with AK-47s and grenades, they blew up and killed a bunch of people, which almost was identical except for the suicide bombing that happened in Brussels. And it's just a matter of, this has been known for going on over 40 years. Of airports being soft targets, and specifically these parts of airports, and people just don't seem to learn the lessons from the past.
What about you, James?
Well, first you have to look at Prime Minister Charles Michel of Belgium. He has handled the situation in good and bad. First, looking at good, he decided not to take 2 resignations of 2 of his top prime ministers, saying that the reasons for why they were giving the resignations, of course, is because there were certain security failures. But Prime Minister Charles Michel said that he would not accept it because they were in a time of war. And in a time of war, no one leaves the field. Now, that's a strong statement from a prime minister whose nation is under attack. But for the bad, you look at what has happened with Turkey and the United States coming out and saying that they had forewarned of this, well, at least one of the bombers in the airport being on a watch list. But the response that Charles Michel had was that the person that they were warning was only a minor perpetrator, not the mastermind. So they needn't be worried about someone like that.
It's not that they needn't be worried, it's that it's a matter of prioritization. Brussels is about the size of Maryland.
Sure.
The state of Maryland.
But when you
but here's the thing with counterterrorism, you either have it or you don't. Mm-hmm. And the Belgians knew for a while that they didn't have the full counterterrorism capabilities of the United States or even France. And so with what limited resources, and they are overstretched, they've had the FBI in France come in to help out, is that they had to prioritize, and unfortunately they missed.
Yes, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. And when the perpetrator we're talking about, just like you said, the prioritization of this perpetrator, I would imagine a suicide bomber should rank pretty high up there on the list of people to watch out for. And looking at who they should look out for on these watch lists, it's definitely people that are affiliated with those groups. They shouldn't just look at who the headmasters are of these groups.
But the headmasters are the ones that are saying attack this target at this date, at this time.
Right.
And if you can take those guys out, then you can buy yourself some time to wrap up the rest of the network.
But obviously that wasn't the case, because after we caught the headmaster, who was a part of the Paris attacks, we have these attacks later.
It's a cell network.
So exactly. So if we're looking at who we need to attack, capturing the headmaster is obviously not working.
But don't you think that Belgium should have a counterterrorist organization, because Brussels is known for their large populations of neighborhood terrorists living in the community.
Terrorists? They're not Spider-Man, Louise.
True, but terrorists living in the neighborhoods. So shouldn't they thought of having a terrorist a counter-terrorist organization?
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, you're falling into the shoulda, woulda, coulda. I mean, in hindsight, they should have done a lot more. When it comes to the counterterrorism unit, of course they should have, but there's a lot of areas in which they exist in gray that you're not able to always point out for the future. And this is one of those cases, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So Matt, 3 Americans were killed during the attacks. When President Obama was asked about his thoughts of the attacks, he was at a baseball game in Cuba with short sleeves. Many have criticized him for addressing the issue in such a manner. Do you agree with those criticisms?
I don't. What do terrorists seek to do? They seek to cause disruption in our lives. They seek to change our behavior. So we're fearful of them. We're fearful of our everyday lives. And the way you combat that is you stand up and you don't let them change how you live your day-to-day life. Undoubtedly, the president was briefed as soon as the attacks happened, and he was made aware by his counterterrorism team. He convened his counterterrorism team as soon as he got back to the United States. I think it's an unfair assessment that, just because he's at a baseball game with his family, that he wasn't well informed and he wasn't.
Well, President Obama doesn't get phone calls from terrorists saying, "Hey, does Thursday work for you? That we can bomb this target and then you can have a proper response?" And he's the head of state and head of government of the most powerful country on earth. Isn't what a terrorist wants more, other than controlling the narrative in the media, is to completely disrupt what's going on in a country. And if the President of the United States has planned out to make a trip to renew relations with a country that we haven't had good relations for in over 60 years, that the President ought to stop everything that he's doing for, I hate to say, the scum of, for the scum of the earth that have murdered 50, 60 people and wounded hundreds of others. The President needs to stop everything that he is doing to address these petty criminals who are in hell right now, I hope. And he has to stop his day in doing things that a head of state needs to do because of these people and their evil plans.
Look,
It would put the president in much more jeopardy to actually transit him early in terms of logistics. It's a massive logistical chain that brought the president to Cuba. It wasn't just Air Force One flying in. It was 3 C-17s carrying his motorcade as well as staff.
And his fuel.
And
the Second Air Force One.
And the Second Air Force One, and all the backup equipment, and all the protection detail that travels with him. It would have been a monumental problem to move him out of the country to react to something that he could easily address from Air Force One.
He should have left the country, but my question is, shouldn't he have waited until the end of the baseball game, and in a suit or whatever, and now address his thoughts on
But then if he had done that, he would have gotten blamed for not responding fast enough.
And then what was the reporter doing him, asking him in the middle of a game?
We live in a day and age where...
ESPN reporter.
Okay.
So...
We live in a day and age where information travels, we travel at the speed of information. If we don't put out a statement fast, then you get blamed for it. If you put out just as easily as if you put out a statement that's more measured and more rehearsed later.
We've dealt with this question ever since George Bush, when we were wondering, why didn't he get up, run out of the room after those children were done reading that book during 9/11? Obviously not to cause disruption. Obviously not to show the terrorists that they're able to control his schedule, his mind, his say-so. And the presidents, Bush and Obama, both made the right decision. This accusation is an accusation without information. People that make these accusations, cough, cough, Republican candidates, think that Obama is some sort of a president that doesn't care about people's lives, and that is obviously not the case. It's an accusation, like I said, without information.
So, next question up to you. I'm going to ask you, why is it now that President Obama is meeting with world leaders and finding a solution to ISIS, and why didn't he just have done something earlier on?
Well, now we're starting to see counterterrorism actually come into effect, and the United States is having a large hand in how a lot of those play out. We had a bomb defusal in Paris, we have bomb defusal in Belgium, and I believe there might have been one in Italy, at least a terror plot that was canceled. We're looking at counterterrorism action that is being put into massive scale, and that is through a lot of pressure from the United States and from a lot of European citizens. I mean, heck, the European Union capital was attacked. If Washington, D.C. was under attack, we would jump into the same countermeasures, maybe not with the same knee-jerk reaction that we have in the past.
But you're right, we did after 9/11 when the Pentagon got struck.
Right. But not the same knee-jerk reactions, you're right. So, again, I think that the actions that he is taking are correct. I think that the cells that have been able to be dissolved is wonderful. And I don't think that we're ever going to see a world in the next 5 years without terrorist attacks. This is an endeavor that will take a long time.
All right. The Belgian courts have agreed that the captured terrorists will be tried in France. Why there? We'll go with you, Matt.
Gosh, really, you have to pick me. If I recall correctly, one of the terrorists was captured had some role in the Paris bombings as well.
Right. So I'm talking about him.
And so extradition, they do have an extradition treaty in place. I'm right now drawing a total blank on the French legal process for that, other than it's very structured and it's very heavily reliant on legal scholarship.
I say this definitely is a situation for Paris to control and take care of. One reason I would point to this is a lot of anti-Muslim attacks in Paris. One thing I want to note, though, is a lot of that happens from ISIS activists, people trying to do it through martyrdom, attacking refugee camps and all that. So that is the first place where we need to apply the first aid of resolving the situation, in Paris, in France. A lot of those refugees have not been resolved in the situations that they're living in, nor have they been resolved in the way that they're looked at. So that situation must be solved in Paris and France, not from a not from an international perspective, but from a PR perspective, if that's a good way of putting it. We have to look at it as the first place we need to resolve the situation is the first place where it started in Europe, and that is France.
So, David, presidential hopeful Donald Trump stated that these attacks were just the beginning. What do you think he means by this?
That there's going to be more attacks. That seems what he means. As far as them being just the beginning, Donald Trump likes to make a lot of noise and act like he's the first person to say things just because he says them louder than other people. Just the beginning. These attacks have been happening for a while. You want to trace back to the Madrid train bombing. You want to go back to the Paris terror attack. There's a solid network of ISIS terrorists inside Europe that are operating and planning to operate. Of course, it's going to keep happening. He seems to like to state the obvious and say it loudly, so it seems like he's the smartest person in the room.
Okay. Do you think that these attacks might be even bigger or even more complicated than the ones that have just passed?
Okay. ISIS strategy is to have them more as frequently as possible, as opposed to as big as possible. Because yes, when it's big, it causes a lot of casualties, but if it's constant, if you can constantly be peppering your target with attacks, then it's more of a psychological attack than just
then you're
a
under
big
siege
one.
rather than
Then you're under siege rather than just the one French Brookings scholar that came by. I believe all of us were there. He stated how it didn't really impact the terrorist attacks, didn't impact the French until the Paris attacks, because Charlie Hebdo happened and it was, okay, this is a one-off incident. And then before the end of the year was out, the Paris attacks happened. And if you can have this constant state of terror attacks happening, then you can drill it into somebody's brain that this is the new normal. This isn't just an incident that rarely happens. This is the new normal. Be afraid.
And it has attacked pop culture. I mean, Mariah Carey canceled her tour through Belgium because of this, saying that she was worried about safety concerns. But then you look at the opposite side of that coin. You find Adele having concerts in memoriam and celebrating Belgium life and what happened in Brussels, hoping for more change against Muslim attackers. So on one end, we do have cancellations, and it does affect people around the world, but on the other, we have hope.
Well, let's just hope that, that a brighter future can happen, will come to Brussels and even Belgium, and hopefully this issue with terrorism can be resolved shortly in Europe. So let's go to the next question. Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders have had great successes in the election cycle. Trump is a GOP frontrunner, and Sanders is shaking Clinton's boots, a move that most analysts said would not have happened. Let's begin with Sanders. He won all 3 Democratic primaries last week. This week, he is projected to win Wisconsin and is only a couple points behind Clinton in her home state of New York. How would you explain Bernie's success? So let's start with you, Matt.
I'd say he's been appealing a lot to the young people, the first-time voters, and that you have a very magnetic candidate speaking things that a lot of people want to hear. They want to see change in our government, and that motivates them to fight harder.
But many analysts say that these first-time voters don't come out. So they're in big crowds, they go to his rallies, but they don't come out.
But they donate. Is that he's received so many small donations of just less than $200 that he's able to out-fundraise Clinton at this point. He raised, I want to say, $43 million last month.
You got to her 30?
Yeah. And he's projected to raise even more this month.
Yeah, Hawaii was definitely, I guess, as you can say, a Hawaiian punch to Hillary's face. Looking at the actual statistics, people in Hawaii were looking at the Democratic voter turnout. We were expecting 15% increase from the last election. What we saw instead was a 95% increase in Democratic voter turnout. That blows any statistician's guess or approximation out of the water. It was nuts. So if you're looking at how Bernie's feeling, let's just say it was a good weekend at Bernie's.
So, well, one of the criticisms that's been made of pollsters, particularly when it comes to Bernie Sanders, is that a lot of these pollsters, they use home phone numbers to do their surveys. They use, really, if you could say, outdated means of collecting this information to what the youngsters are. Good example of that was when Bernie Sanders was behind in Michigan on the polls, and then he won it by over 20%. Just a massive swing. It was like a 25, 30 percentage point swing. And what these polls aren't capturing is they're not capturing youth, these millennials these days, that are actually coming out in numbers more than they did before. It's almost always been, oh, the youth never come out to vote. But because Bernie Sanders has been able to reach them with a message, just like Obama did, those two candidates, Obama and Bernie Sanders, have been able to get the youth to come out, and the polls just do not reflect reality right now with Bernie Sanders.
Another thing that people have said is that, this weekend and even in Wisconsin, he's able to he's going to win, or who's going to win Wisconsin and won the last primaries is because all these states are, the majority of the voters are white voters, compared to when you're down in the South, there's a majority of black voters, which Hillary is obviously able to capture that vote. So do you think it's just now that we're not seeing that many black voters coming out, a large population of black voters coming out, that Bernie's able to win these states?
Well, I guess if you're looking at the diversity of voter turnout for Bernie Sanders as compared to Hillary Clinton, I would approximate that for Hillary Clinton it's much more diverse. For Bernie Sanders, you got a much more youthful vote, of course. But if you want to look at the diversity of the youth, I would say it doesn't matter. You're looking at youthful voters. But if you're looking at the African-American vote or the Hispanic vote, I would say that that's more primarily Hillary Clinton's field. But if you want to go back to David Sarabian's point, if you want to look at what Bernie Sanders did get, it was 142 delegates. And that is what matters.
Right. So Clinton said that she did not want to have another debate with Sanders because of because in her words, of his critical words towards her. Was this a wise position for Clinton to refuse to not have another debate with Bernie?
That's about as wise as my dad's ex-wives.
Okay. All right.
The thing is that, okay, Bernie Sanders is so genuine in his message and even in his body language, and even in people have done analysis of his face. He actually believes what he believes. And Hillary Clinton not being able to take some attacks from Bernie Sanders, come on, Hillary. Come on. You were around for Monica Lewinsky and Jennifer Flowers with your husband. You say that you can't take attacks. We know that you can't take attacks. I think it's a good point. How many debates do we need? I mean, really, how many debates do we need at this point, one? And two, when it comes to Hillary Clinton, I don't think that she can compete with Bernie Sanders when it comes to winning people over in a debate anymore.
What about you, Matt?
I've just been watching the Nielsen numbers for the Democrat debates, and I've watched them fall dramatically over the past several. And so it's, several debates are great, but at this point people are getting burned out, as it were, in the terms of number of debates. I've tried to watch as many debates as I could personally, but,
I mean, when was the last time we had this many debates in an election?
2008 had a ton of them.
Yeah.
But not at this point in the game.
Hillary mishandled this. The campaign director, or whoever it was that came on for her on CNN and said how they're not going to have the discussion and debate because of his candor and what he said in the past. I mean, good God, people. Bernie Sanders looks like Snow White compared to Hillary Clinton. A freaking sparrow landed on his lectern and he got Mother Nature's vote. A dove. Sure, according to Bernie Sanders, it was a dove, but I want to check the feed. Listen, when we're looking at comparing the two next to each other in character, Hillary Clinton rejecting Bernie Sanders and then saying the reason why she is doing so is because of his character. oh my gosh. I slammed my head against the counter when I saw that discussion. It is a horrible, horrible way to handle this from Hillary's point of view.
So last topic. Trump has obviously been in the news lately, and one of the things that came up was his political manager being charged for a misdemeanor battery. Will this affect Trump's campaign, or will it just be another fuel for the fire for the Trump train? Jay.
I'd say it's a.
Go
sorry,
ahead, Matt.
Go ahead.
No.
Yeah, you go ahead.
I'd say it's affected his campaign in that it's being discussed a lot more now, but I don't know if it's going to be how it's going to play out long term. We've seen him say some things in the past, in the beginning, and we've seen him kind of change his opinion on them, and then change his view on them as well. And then we kind of forget about them.
One good demonstration on that flip-flopping is last night's town hall with Chris Matthews.
Oh, you mean the one where he changed his opinion on one issue 3 times in 3 hours?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, I watched that, and to tell you the God to honest truth, Trump changes his angles more than a white girl takes a selfie. I mean, he changes his position more than a UNLV basketball coach. Okay, and now the topic of abortion is one whole other conversation. The topic that I'd like to talk about is the actual flip-flopping that he's done. I mean, when you look at his first statement, he was saying that he didn't really know. He's going with whatever the Republican candidates, the Republican Party, whatever their platform is, saying that it's a very complex issue. And then when pressed, he said, yes, I think women should have some sort of repercussion, some sort of consequence. Then after the discussion, he had a tweet saying, well, it's a very complex issue. And then after that, a campaign manager, as best as I can manage to understand, sent out a speech and said sent out a comment by Trump saying that the doctors are the ones that must face the repercussions. I mean, heck, Trump has been edited so much, he's more edited than a picture of Kim Kardashian. Trump has lost the ground he has made in the past several months. He has lost his position as a hardliner that sticks to his points, to his camp.
Well, there's a good National Journal article today that called it the Donald Trump treadmill, in that for every voter that he wins, he loses one.
Right.
With things like this. And when it comes to issues like this, he just changes his mind all the time just because he wants to be popular. And it's proven that when he's hard-pressed on a particular issue that he doesn't know something, he messes up.
Right.
And I was going to say, and one other thing, the worst thing was he compared himself to Ronald Reagan. He said, I'm like Ronald Reagan. I'm pro-life with exceptions.
Well, my statement is, what other Republican candidate has not compared himself to Reagan?
Well,
I mean,
you're right. It is a part of the requirements. I forgot.
Yes, remember, Ronald Reagan is a Republican god.
Yes.
But let's continue
No,
on
just
to our
God.
next, our final question. So UNLV has hired a new coach, Chris Beard, to lead our Running Rebels. He was hired from Arkansas after going 30-5 in his first season there. Though it is not official, his contract has been sent to the regions, and then next week we'll have a press conference talking about his what he will do for the team. So, do you think this will be the answer to the Running Rebels question or?
That they've been looking
yes,
for?
Yes, there it goes.
Well, if I can say a couple things about Beard, I'd point to his credentials. He led the Arkansas Little Rock team to the second round of the NCAA finals. That is a big credential alone. Not only that, but he's won the Sun Belt Conference Coach of the Year. This is an accreditation that isn't just handed down. It's like some sort of participation award. This is an actual credential that means something in the basketball world arena. So if you're looking at if Beard has qualifications, the simple answer is yes. But my answer to it is I'm still holding out for Stacey Augmon. Stacey, if you can hear me, please come.
So, what about you, Matt? How much work does he have ahead of him for the next season?
He has to mesh well with the players. The players have to work well with him. He has to bring us back, move the Running Rebels forward. We have to start running that ball down the court.
Do you think that the loss of Zimmerman going to, drafting himself to the NBA will be a great loss to UNLV, David, or no?
Well, of course it's a loss because he's gone to the NBA. But if there's something that Coach Beard can bring is that he has the talent, one, to spot talent, two, to train that talent, and three, to coach that talent to winning games. And he provides a full spectrum of coaching that we really need at this school. And basketball is something that UNLV has a great deal of pride on, and justifiably so. And we really need to bring that back, and I think that he's a better shot than we've had before on being able to do that.
When it comes to Beard, it's simple. He's a slam dunk.
All right. Well, with that, that's all the time that we have. I just want to thank our panelists for coming. Please follow us on Facebook at UNLV Scramble and on our Twitter at UNLV The Scramble. Also, email us your opinions at unlvscramble@gmail.com. For further discussion, we want to hear from you. Answer our weekly question. What are your opinions on Trump's remarks from the town hall last night? Let us know. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.